Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, September 20th, 2025, and I've got some show notes to announce. I have to travel for work, and so that's going to impact the show. And so tomorrow is another thing, but there won't be a kitchen table talk tomorrow, unfortunately. I was very excited to talk to everybody about what's going on with the new developments vis-a-vis Charlie Kirk and everything else as well. There's lots of crazy stuff. The hate speech laws, the notwithstanding clause, all of that stuff really needs to be talked about. So I can't do it though tomorrow. I'm out of town, and that's unfortunate. But Friday the 26th, and I'm not sure about the 27th and the 28th. They may or may not have shows, so apologies, but there's things I have to get done, and so that's just heads up, everyone. Digital IDs are coming to England, and I'm not surprised. I think they're also going to try and bring it into Canada if they can do what they're doing with the hate speech laws and the notwithstanding clause. If they get those things through, then everything else is on the table. Like digital IDs, oh sure, central bank digital currencies. I thought you'd never ask. Like, it's all on the table, and very, very dangerous. Hate crime is a top priority, and not the violent crime we see in our cities that is wildly out of step with historical norms. I'll show you the historical norms that I'm referring to as well. Carney does nothing and announces it publicly. Cabinet retreat for spending cuts, and they have not found any spending cuts despite cabinet retreats. Lots of money, all sorts of things spent to have ministers in the prime thinking position. I'm not sure exactly why they have to spend all this money. Don't we pay for meeting rooms in Ottawa? Anyway, I digress. They do nothing and they announce it, and we're expected to think that there's progress being made, and it just doesn't look like there's progress being made. Designating Antifa terrorists. I'm interested to see Trump go after the money. If he goes after the money, it may be impactful, but we'll have to see. Canada seems like it really, really wants to look past this Antifa thing, and indeed, yesterday I used the example of, remember when the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was declared a terrorist organization, or the government said they were definitely going to do that, and it took them years to do that. And the Samadhan thing, they declared them a terrorist organization, and Samadhan was still had charity status, and they were still fundraising in Canada. So, I mean, we're super good at declaring things terrorist organizations and doing something about it. Now, I think that Trump, if he declares something a terrorist organization and he's going after the money funding this terror organization, he will be impactful, but I don't have any faith that Canada would do anything at all, even if it did designate Antifa terrorists. What else? H-1B visas to $100,000 for Trump, and we'll compare that to the hiring practices in Canada and the temporary foreign worker practices in Canada. And the Conservatives want a 3-strike law, and I feel like 3 times? You want people to commit violent crimes 3 times before not being eligible for bail? What? How does that even make it? It doesn't make any sense. It's insane. Anyway, we have to talk about the notwithstanding clause and the hate crime laws and all sorts of stuff. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Mario is highlighting the notwithstanding clause. There's been more responses and reactions from the notwithstanding clause being announced, and I thought we'd go over that. And Mario says, Sean Fraser is asking the Supreme Court of Canada to rule on the Charter of Rights, the notwithstanding clause. It's been in our charter for over 40 years. No Attorney General in Canada in Canadian history has ever asked the Supreme Court of Canada to weigh in on its legitimacy. The clause was deliberately included in 1982 as a democratic safeguard, allowing elected legislatures to override certain charter rights for up to 5 years. Zero debate in Parliament, zero public outreach. He's triggering a constitutional crisis, and probably on purpose, I guess. Here's Mario again. He says, Sean Fraser's lost his marbles. He wants to get rid of the notwithstanding clause. It's only been used 16 times in 40 plus years, and 12 of those times were in Quebec. He's proposing unelected judges overrule elected lawmakers, provinces lose flexibility, rights applied with zero balance no matter the context. He wants the courts to run our country. Lunatic! Exclamation point, right? And yeah, pretty wild stuff. And Danielle Smith is responding to Sean Fraser's attack on the notwithstanding clause as well. And she says, the notwithstanding clause is integral to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and an unassailable provincial constitutional right. While the Alberta government does not support the content of Quebec's Bill 21, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Quebec's constitutional right to invoke the notwithstanding clause as its government deems fit. We are extremely disappointed that the federal government would risk national unity and a foundational principle of our Constitution by attempting to attack the use of the notwithstanding clause by a sovereign provincial government in this manner, and request they withdraw their appeal to the Supreme Court immediately. So Danielle Smith says, you need to do something about this. You need to withdraw your whole thing. This needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. They're not going to stop. Scott Moe says, Saskatchewan will strongly oppose the federal government's attempt to limit the province's ability to use the notwithstanding clause. This would mean significant infringement on the autonomy of provinces and their elected legislatures. The common argument that using the notwithstanding clause is a violation of the Constitution is false. The notwithstanding clause is part of the Constitution that premiers like Alberta's Pete Lougheed, I'm getting that probably wrong, and Saskatchewan's Alan Blakeney, fought to have included because they understood that when there is a collision of rights, the will of the duly elected legislature, not the courts, should prevail. In other words, Premier Blakeney wrote, if Parliament or the legislature decides that the breach of a charter right or freedom not set out in the charter, or where political or other circumstances are such that compliance with the charter right will produce undesirable results, Parliament or the legislature may act notwithstanding the charter right or notwithstanding a decision of the court that a charter right has been breached. So nobody can override this. We're just doing it. We understand a charter right's been breached, and notwithstanding that, we're doing it anyway. This seems to me to be an elegant way to deal with the inevitable decisions that will occur between rights which we seek to protect through legislative and executive action and rights which we seek to protect through judicial action. I completely agree with Premier Blakeney and strongly disagree with Ottawa's attempt to limit provinces' ability to use the notwithstanding clause. So he doesn't ask for it to be removed, but maybe that's the next thing. That's the next call to arms. Here's Wide Awake Media, and he says, in 1974, Robert Welch, founder of the John Birch Society, delivered a speech warning of a globalist plan to destroy America, which has since proven to be eerily accurate. Part of the plan is to induce a gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. And this is kind of what I've been talking about as well for a little while. We'll just listen to about a minute of this. It's older, like from the 1950s, 1970s, 1974. And here we go.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare. The beauties and the absolute necessity of peace. Peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government, which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
Right. And a lot of those markers, I think, keep getting hit. Just checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. I remember I was a newspaper delivery kid. I had a newspaper route and I walked that route, man. And it ended in a 7-Eleven, so it wasn't so bad. I would get a Slurpee and I would get Tootsie Rolls, and it was delicious. Good walk home. Good breakfast on a Saturday morning, I'll tell you what. But I read the newspaper, and it had often in the classified section, I always found the classified section interesting. It would say, these are the steps to a communist takeover. We're at step 5, and I would read it, and I would think to myself, like, what do I do about this if I know about this? And I asked my dad, and my dad was like, well, he's like, you got to kind of balance it with how likely is that to happen? And of course, everybody's not really looking at anything critically, I think, generally, or if they look at it critically, they think it's not nearly as bad as it seems, right? And if only they knew how bad it really is. My gosh. Michelle Ferrari says, Canada has become Gotham City under the Liberal rule. This is the hate speech section of today's show. The police should not have to warn the public about murder suspects out on bail. They should be in jail. Yeah, and it's 2 separate murder suspects. And I had this whole Running Man joke, but I think it's too far, so I won't make the Running Man joke. Meaningful bail reform. Peterborough police chief voices concerns after homicide suspects granted bail. Homicide suspects, right? They're both charged with manslaughter in separate homicide investigations. So I laugh, but it's very serious, right? This isn't not good at all, right? Greg says the Liberal Party wants to target hate in your community, not the rise in violent crime. And Greg makes a good point. Here's Greg making the same point again, but I think it's a well-made point. Greg says, Justice Minister Sean Fraser says, we see hate almost everywhere in Canada. Actually, we're seeing death, despair, and a rise in violent crime everywhere. This new crime of hate will clearly be used to target and punish people with the wrong politics, right? Or who have suspicious eyebrows for what the news is telling us. Here is, hold on, I want to show you. I have this. This is the chart. So this is the historical, this is immigrant crime wave, says Raul. And the natural growth rate, net migration, net temporary residence. So there's just a huge, temporary residence, net migration, the increase in people, and correlation is not causation or anything like that, but the increase in net temporary residence correlates with, the rise in rents, the rise in inflation, the rise in crime, right? And so what's going on there? And people say, I know what's going on here. We're importing criminals. That's what we're doing. And we're letting them out on bail a whole lot. And we seem to be, even violent criminals. And that seems to be problematic. But the Liberals' main focus is on combating hate in every facet. And how do you define hate? Well, that's the rub, right? That's the problem here. Here is gov.exe. He says, Justice Minister Sean Fraser introduces a bill to the House of Commons to combat hate crime and propaganda. The Liberals want the power to decide what is hate speech and propaganda. What could go wrong? Everything could go wrong, right? And that's the plan. Here we go.
Daily routine of business. Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills. Mr. Fraser, seconded by Mr. Ali, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Code, Hate Propaganda, Hate Crime, and Access to Religious or Cultural Places. This motion is deemed adopted. Mr. Fraser, seconded by Mr. Ali, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted. Daily routine of business.
So there you go. It's first reading, and they go through the reading. And man, this might take a little bit, and I don't want to bore you, but I feel like it's important to read the bill. And I'm not a lawyer, so I feel like it would be beneficial to, and I'm going to find kind of a legal brief on what this bill entails and what it means to you and me in non-legalese and non-criminal code talk, because this is Bill C9, and this is the amendments to the Criminal Code C9 wants to make. This is the first reading. So this is thanks to the Canada Poly Chat. They had the link to the bill as soon as it was published. They were sending, there was 404s, like there was nothing there yet, and people were like, man, nothing there yet. And I was like, man, you guys are on it. Like, you already know the URL. Great job. But as soon as it was there, people were posting it and talking about it, and I find it interesting. It feels like they can use this to crack down on the internet, just like they use it in England, just like they use it in the United Kingdom to crack down on speech on the internet. I hope I'm wrong about that. Really, I genuinely, honestly hope that I'm wrong about that. I hope that Canadians' ability to have free expression as promised in the Charter is respected. But people are concerned, right? People are definitely concerned. So this Bill C9 is an act to amend the Criminal Code, hate propaganda, hate crime, and access to religious or cultural places. The short title is the Combating Hate Act. Paragraph, and then so it goes through what it's changing the Criminal Code to. Paragraph A of the definition offense in Section 183 of the Criminal Code is amended by adding the following after subparagraph LXSI-1 or point 1. Willful promotion of hatred, terrorism, and hate symbols. Everyone commits an offense who willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group by displaying in any public place a symbol that is principally used by or principally associated with a listed entity as defined in subsection 8301. The swastika or the SS bolts, a symbol that so nearly resembles a symbol described in A or B that it's likely to be confused with that symbol. Punishment: everybody who commits this offense under subsection 2.2 is guilty of an indictable offense and liable for imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or guilty of an offense punishable on a summary conviction. Subsection 319, 4 to 6 of the Act are replaced by the following. No person, these are defenses, no person shall be convicted of an offense under subsection 2.2 if the display of the symbol was for a legitimate purpose, including a legitimate purpose related to journalism, religion, education, or art. That is not contrary to the public interest. Or B, if in good faith the display of the symbol was intended to point out for the purpose of removal matters producing or tending to produce feelings of hatred toward an identifiable group in Canada. I'm not sure I understand that one. Forfeiture: if a person is convicted of an offense under subsection 1.2.21 or 2.2 or section 318, anything by means of or in relation to which the offense was committed on such conviction may, in addition to other punishments imposed, be ordered by the presenting provincial court judge or judge to be forfeit to His Majesty in right of the province to which that person is convicted for disposal of the Attorney General may direct. Exemptions from the seizure of communication facilities, and then it lists a bunch of subsections. Hate crime, subsection 3197. The Act is amended by adding the following in alphabetical order. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. What? Is saying that man can't be a woman hatred? Is that attacking an identifiable group? I don't think so. That's discussing biology, right? I'm not attacking anybody specifically. I'm not trying to harm anybody by stating biological facts, but I fear they're going to say that's hate. Hate crime, offense motivated by hatred. Everyone who commits an offense referred to in this section as the included offense under this act or any other act of Parliament, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to the punishment provided for in subsection 5, or B, guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. Definition of hatred is the same as I just read. Clarification: for greater certainty, the commission of an offense under this act or any other act of Parliament is not, for the purpose of this section, motivated by hatred based on any other factors mentioned in subsection 1 solely because it discredits, humiliates, hurts, or offends. Limitation, no proceedings shall be committed under subsection 1 by way of indictment if the included offense may be prosecuted only by way of summary conviction. So if they say, you are jaywalking, sir, and that was hateful jaywalking, they can't indict you for that. They have to keep it summary conviction. They have to keep it to the same level, I guess. I don't think it's a summary conviction for jaywalking, but you get my meaning. Maximum penalty, and so it's just talking about how many years are added on. And intimidation, buildings used for religious worship. Every person commits an offense who engages in any conduct with the intent to provoke a state of fear in a person in order to impede their access to a building or structure or part of a building or structure that is primarily used for religious worship, or by an identifiable group defined in subsection 318 for administrative, social, cultural, or sports activities or events, as an educational institution, including a daycare center, or as a residence for seniors or a cemetery. Obstruction or interference with access. Every person who commits an offense without lawful authority intentionally obstructs or interferes with another person's lawful access to a building or structure, or part of a building or structure referred to in paragraph 1A, or to a cemetery. Every person who does this is liable to imprisonment for a term not more than 10 years, or guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. So that's pretty wild. And there's a bit more, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I think those are the major pieces of this. Here's the food professor. He's responding to this, and he says, Justice Minister Sean Fraser has introduced a bill in the House of Commons to combat hate crime, propaganda, and threats to identity. Fine, but here's my concern. For decades, I've argued that supply management is a dairy disaster. If the bill passes, would I risk being arrested for saying so, since many dairy farmers see such criticism as an attack on their identity, even hate speech, and a challenge to their very existence? Good question. I wonder similar things about things that I say. And I'm not intending anything I say as hateful, but I have questions that are uncomfortable for people, right? And even uncomfortable for the government. They may find it hateful because it's so uncomfortable for them because of their policies are terrible. Greg again says, as predicted, this new anti-hate legislation is supported by different warring political factions. Muslim lobby groups NCCM will likely support it as well. The result will be less freedom for all Canadians and more tools to commit lawfare against peaceful protests of all kinds. And yeah, so I think that that's true. This is the number of people coming in, and a 16-year-old was arrested in a homicide of an 8-year-old, and two suspects are outstanding. Judicial authorization to identify young persons. So people are killing 8-year-olds in Toronto? This is pretty horrific. The real Mr. Bench says, a question for Sean Fraser and your new hate crime bill. Is it now hate to say I believe there are only two genders and you can't switch? What about saying I don't want the Muslim invasion to take over Canada, or that I want my roads to be safe? You open the door to mass immigration and the problems that come with that. Maybe you need to take some accountability and some responsibility. Yep. Matt Alexander says, Canada does not need new hate laws, just enforce the existing laws. My wife and I were fired from teaching for refusing to celebrate LGBTQ with kids. My wife took down a pride poster from her classroom door. She was suspended. Then the board took down the pride flag. That was okay. Hate and harm will always be defined by the group in power. That's dangerous. Yes, exactly. So when they take over, when these people take over and say, yes, this is hatred. We know this is hatred because we feel like it's hatred, and hatred is bad, and you can't be bad because we're Canadians and we're good. And everybody ascribes to these high ideals in Canada, and we all want to be good. So if you don't want to be good, we don't want you to be a part of Canada. And it's like, well, you're importing people who don't culturally line up with any of that at all. It's wild. Juno News says Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner has tabled a private member's bill that would prevent Canadian judges from handing out lighter sentences to non-citizens to help them avoid deportation. Well, I mean, great, but why don't we stop the invasion? Like, I guess that's one problem, but there are other things. Why don't we stop the invasion? Why don't we stop the invasion? It's crazy. It's absolutely bonkers. With that, we've got to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to catch the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. I don't have the private paid stream running yet. I'm hoping for next week, but again, I'm super, super busy, and like this time of year, super busy. So fingers crossed that next week it works out. I have to test it, and then I have to buy the software, test it, and make sure it works. But I think seems like it'll work. What else? Head over to CanadaPoly.com.